Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and Tom Homan gives Morning Joe a wake-up call that news organization desperately needs. They really need to understand what's actually happening with ICE and illegal immigration. Let's dive in.
56% of those surveyed disapprove of the president's immigration stances. That's a 10-point drop from back in February, blamed by some on some of the in-your-face tactics, the masked ICE agents, the detention centers like Alligator Alcatraz. Why do you think that the majority of Americans right now do not like what they're seeing?
First of all, I don't believe the polls. Second of all, if there's any movement in the polls at all, it's because of the false stories out there about ICE. Like I read in the paper every day that the majority of people in ICE custody are not criminals. Wrong. The majority are criminals. But now the argument is, are they criminal enough? Is a DUI dangerous enough? Well, 10,000 people a year die from DUIs. I think DUI is a crime. So, then you got this whole, back and forth on how serious a crime is it. But I looked at the numbers yesterday. A majority of our criminals have criminal history. Who are the rest of the people in our custody? They're national security threats. They may not have a criminal conviction, but they're national security threats based on intelligence reports. For instance, ICE arrests over 200 Iranian nationals that are currently in custody. Yeah, they're not documented criminals, but they're national security threats. They need to be detained. There's also what we call expedited removal cases. There are certain immigration arrests that we make within the confines of the board within 2 years that we process through expedited removal, which by statute, by federal law, we're required to detain. So that the media just isn't telling the truth about who we're in detention. On the second part of that, people need to know that ICE officers are simply enforcing the laws that Congress enacted. And you got members of Congress out there comparing ICE to Nazis and to racists and to terrorists. They're simply enforcing laws that Congress enacted. So if ICE is, if they're racist for enforcing the law, what's that make members of Congress who wrote the law? It's just ridiculous, and the rhetoric has to be tapped down, or we're going to see more violence. I said 2 months ago, if the rhetoric didn't decrease, there would be bloodshed, and there has been. One man was killed trying to ambush a Border Patrol facility. He died. Another group of people tried to ambush an ICE facility, and one officer was shot in the neck. This rhetoric has to stop. The truth needs to come out. The men and women of ICE are simply doing their job enforcing the law that Congress enacted. And I want to leave it with this. People need to understand that men and women of ICE, I was one. I came up through the ranks. They're mothers and fathers too. And they see terrible things every single day. So they don't hang their heart on a hook every day they go to work. These are men and women who are out there trying to make this country safer and concentrating on those public safety threats and making this country safe again.
And we don't, my daughter had people coming up to her in masks, throwing her into a car, I would say fight like hell. But of course here, though, if it's law enforcement officers, you would say do what the law enforcement officers tell you to do. How do we fix that? How do we balance those interests of protecting ICE officers, but also letting the person being apprehended know this is a law enforcement officer, do what they say?
Well, Joe, I've been doing this for over 40 years. I started on board in 1984, and I'm out on the streets every week with these teams. And yeah, they are masked, trying to protect their, themselves and their families because they're being doxxed. Their spouses are being doxxed. Their children are being doxxed. This modern technology, you can find out where everybody's family is. So they wear the mask in self-protection, but they do wear identifiers. Now, I've never been in an operation and I've seen any officer who hasn't got an HSI patch or an ERO patch, an ICE patch, an FBI, DEA patch. They all have patches. And when they approach somebody, the first thing they do is identify themselves as an ICE officer or as an FBI agent.
So you think they should do that? Because I've seen videos of a woman being taken off the street. I think it was a Tufts student, a foreign student, that had like 5 or 6 people without uniforms on. Your position is they should, even if they're covered to protect their identity, their family's identity, they should have markings on their uniform, right?
Yeah, if they're in tactical gear, they have markings on uniform. If they're in plain clothes, like I am right now, then they show identification, tell me who they are, that they're not, I'm an officer with ICE, a special agent with ICE. They identify themselves, and identify that person and let them know why they're being detained. I mean, that is just standard operating procedure. I mean, I know you see there's a lot of videos out there. It's hard to tell, exactly what's happening in every video, but I'm telling you the way these officers are trained. And I've been on the streets every week since January 20th with these teams, and they have either identified themselves so they're in plain clothes, or the tactical gear they're wearing is clearly marked. But the masks, I think, are important. How do we get rid of the mask? Stop the hateful rhetoric. Assaults on ICE officers are up over 800%. And I specifically mean members of Congress. If members of Congress can compare ICE to the Nazis, that gives some of those people on the far left that the out of control people. It emboldens them to take action. I'm just asking to let's stop the hateful rhetoric.
This is a clown world, ladies and gentlemen, and it's getting worse. The Democrat Party has long had the media on their side, and I'll actually prove it. This is anecdotal, but you can go back and watch these movies. For instance, in Miracle on 34th Street, the original version, the Attenborough version wasn't bad, but the original with Maureen O'Hara, there's a line where the judge is being told by one of his advisors, who later plays Fred on I Love Lucy. The advisor tells him, if you rule against Santa Claus, you'll only get 2 votes in the next election, yours and the district attorney's. And the judge just turns and says, the district attorney's a Republican. And then there was another movie, I think released in the same year. I know that there was a 1940s black and white film about the Reconstruction era in Washington, D.C. And it was this political battle between Thaddeus Stevens and Andrew Johnson, the president, who, by the way, should have been impeached. He should have been the first president impeached because he refused to carry out the laws passed by Congress, even though those laws were terrible. And it made Thaddeus Stevens look like just this ridiculous, crazy, evil person, even though he kind of was. There's a lot. Him and John Brown weren't too different. But again, Andrew Johnson was the Democrat, and he was glorified by this movie. The Democrat Party, even back when they were socially conservative, were the darlings of the mainstream media and Hollywood. And they have had that kind of control ever since then. Hey, y'all. Experts say they rig the markets, print the money, and manipulate the system. But here's the truth. They can't print gold. While the dollar weakens, physical gold and silver stay real, tangible, uncontrolled. When banks go digital and emergencies lock you out of your own funds, gold and silver won't need an internet connection or government permission. Their value is outside the system, a time-tested insurance policy against tyranny, inflation, and economic resets. So don't wait until the trap is sprung. Own what the elites hoard behind closed doors. Physical gold and silver off the grid, because when the system fails, real money talks. And to help you learn more about owning physical gold and silver, we have partnered with the great company Goldco, which supports this channel, which we deeply appreciate. So check out PolitibralGold.com for more info and see if you might even qualify for free silver. That's PolitibralGold.com. That's been the sad truth. That's been the sad reality. That was before the Southern strategy and the very Goldwater revolution in the South, which, by the way, the South's turn to conservatism and turn to the GOP has been because of Barry Goldwater. But I'm getting off in the weeds, but I'm doing that with a single purpose, to talk about media rhetoric. The vast majority of mainstream media despises Republicans and has hated them since the 1900s. They have hated them ever since the New Deal. And it's getting out of control because now they have the internet. Now they have the ability to dox these ICE agents. That's why they're wearing the mask, ladies and gentlemen. This is a wild story here. People are out here taking photos of agents' names, their faces, and posting them online with death threats to their family and themselves, Lyons said at a June press conference in Boston. And that's acting ICE Director Todd Lyons. So I'm sorry if people are offended by wearing the masks, but I'm not going to let my officers and agents go out there and put their lives on the line and their family on the line because people don't like what immigration enforcement is. Folks, Democrat rhetoric has way more consequences than Republican rhetoric. Republican rhetoric is really, remember, Republican rhetoric, will say things to be taken seriously, not literally. Democrats will say things to be taken seriously and literally. There's a huge difference that Republicans try to push the window back. Democrats tell you what they're going to do. And when a person says who they are, believe them. This quote right here terrifies me because it's something that I've been talking about for years. That Democrats have these spaces, not only in the mainstream media, but now on Blue Sky, Tumblr, Reddit, and even what used to be Twitter. They still have this sort of sphere in their own echo chambers, and they are doxing agents for doing their jobs that the American people want them to do. And by the way, speaking of that, you know the poll that they used at the very beginning? That's a YouGov poll. A YouGov poll, however, isn't as scientific. It is entirely on volunteer basis, and yes, all polls are on a volunteer basis. The difference is you seek out the YouGov polls. I actually do this myself because it's kind of interesting, and they actually pay you for it. It takes a while for you to redeem any of the rewards, but it's an interesting thing where they take your polls on certain topics and certain issues. Sometimes it's related to brands, sometimes it's related to politics, sometimes it's sports. But a YouGov poll is about as scientific as a monkey at a typewriter. All right? You can't really use that as factual data because it doesn't have the grounding, it doesn't have the basis, it doesn't filter between Republicans and Democrats. It just says the people who are more interested in these polls. So I'm not really believing that one. What I will believe is the rhetoric around these ICE agents. And I'm not talking about the Republicans that are saying, yes, go Tom Homan, get these people, send them home. Send them home. Their home isn't in America. They don't want their home to be in America, or else they would have come here legally and applied for at least some sort of status. ICE is doing their jobs, and the Democrats are out there screaming about it, and you have their worst operatives doxing them. As someone who has been doxed myself, this is not a fun process. It is a bone-chilling one that ultimately makes you wonder, do we need tighter restrictions? Do we really need to be talking in this rhetoric? I think we actually need to push back. Anyone who is attacking ICE agents, y'all are terrible people. Okay? You are terrible people because you actually have a moral compass. And you're smart enough to know that showing up without traditional clothing that a cop would wear, then flashing a badge saying, we're deporting you, that is, to a basic level, a very amoral thing. But the reality is, when you have a whole segment of your population and you don't know where they come from, you don't know why they're here, they have skipped the process, I'm sorry, there's no reason for me to look at you and give you that much sympathy. That's the reality, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of these people that spew this ridiculous nonsense do have a decent moral compass, but they don't know how to use it, they don't know how to apply it, and they ultimately misuse their own First Amendment rights. This is a problem, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, and Tom Homan is right to call this out, and so is Todd Leons here. But Morning Joe needs a wake-up call, and so do the people that watch that nonsense. But those are my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you think in the comments below. My name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Until then, y'all have a good one.